Hi, this is Edgardo Alfonso, and you're watching BT Talking Baseball. Take it away, Brett.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back inside BT Talks Baseball. I want to thank Edgardo Alfonso for that great introduction. Of course, Fonzie was my guest right here on BT Talks Baseball back in episode 4. It's great to have him back to do an introduction. And we're going to keep a Mets theme today because my guest is the great Howie Rose, the radio voice of the New York Mets and really an encyclopedia of Mets history. And let's get right to it. Howie, thank you so much for joining me right here on BT Talks Baseball.
Pleasure as always, Brett. Good to hear from you.
Howie, I want to talk to you today about your famous put it in the books call, because every Met fan knows if you say put it in the books, the Mets have just won a game. Can you talk about how that came about?
Well, in order to really understand where put it in the books came from, you have to know a little bit about Marty Brennaman, the great Hall of Fame broadcaster of the Cincinnati Reds, who punctuated, and Marty's retired now, but he punctuated Reds victories by saying at the conclusion of a game the Reds had won, and this one belongs to the Reds. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, that is perfect. It's not self-aggrandizing, it's succinct, it sends a very clear message to a listener that the Reds just won, and I thought to myself, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could find something similar to punctuate the end of a Mets victory with. And, you know, having always kind of fooled around with some iteration of in the books after a game that we might have gone to that the Mets won, meaning my buddies and me when I was younger, or even played in a game in the schoolyard that my team won, we'd say something like, well, that's in the books, or this one's in the books. Never exactly put it in the books. But as I got to thinking about how to find a little bit of a hook the way Marty had, that's when the in the books phrase came to me, and I played around with different inflections and such, but eventually settled on the one I use now, and thankfully people seem to like it.
Do you remember the first time you actually uttered the phrase, put it in the books?
I can't tell you. I can't say there was this one game, but I will tell you that I do remember, and again, not in a specific sense that I can pinpoint the exact night or opposition, but I played around with different inflections, none of which I really liked. You know, kind of was sing-songy at first, like the Mets would win, and I'd say, put it in the books, something like that, or put it in the books. I mean, it was just never something I was comfortable with. In fact, I was starting to think I got to think of something else, because this is starting to sound a little too wordy and unnatural. And that's the last thing you want, is to have it sound forced and contrived. So there was a game the Mets won somewhat dramatically. When I just said the way I say now, but really for the first time with this inflection, put it in the books, because I was excited by the way the Mets had won. And just as soon as it came out of my mouth that way, I said, yeah, that I like that. I said, that sounds exactly how I want this concept to sound. And that was sometime, I'm sure, in around 1996 or so, and I've been using it ever since.
Well, Howie, is a question I've always wanted to ask you, and that is, you've broadcast so many Met games. Have you ever forgotten to say, put it in the books after a Mets win?
Well, that's a good question, because there have been a couple of times when I didn't say it right away. And in those situations, I'm proud of that, because my immediate assignment as a play-by-play broadcaster is to describe the scene. So when something special happens, like Johan Santana's no-hitter, it wasn't for at least a full 60 seconds that I actually came around to saying put it in the books, because a monumental event had just taken place, and my first obligation is to describe exactly what I'm watching at that moment. The first thing out of my mouth has to be, Johan Santana has pitched a no-hitter, or words to that effect, just as when the Mets won the pennant in Chicago in 2015, when Dexter Fowler was caught looking at strike 3. The first words out of my mouth had to be, the Mets win the pennant. Put it in the books came a little bit later. There have been a couple of other times along the way, not many, maybe not even a handful in the course of however many years it's been, where I've just said, and that's the Mets win, or the ball game's over. And then, believe it, it doesn't take very long for someone, especially in the age of Twitter, to let us know, hey, don't forget to say put it in the books. So there might have been a couple of times where I just literally vapor locked and forgot. But those other times I mentioned to you were by design.
All right, you brought it up, Howie. You're on Twitter. After years of railing against the social media platform, you have 26,000 plus followers, and you tweet multiple times a day. How did that come about?
Well, I had been prodded for quite a few years, really, since Twitter's inception, to get on there, but I never trusted myself, because, as I've said many times recently, I've always and had always been afraid that, after that second glass of wine, after dinner, I'll think, this is funny. I could send this. Nobody's going to get offended or ticked off. And, as soon as you send it, you go, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So that's really what kept me away from it. I just didn't trust myself. But what changed is this unfortunate situation in reality that we've all been enveloped by, and that is, of course, the pandemic and the shutdown. And so it's a combination of factors that got me onto Twitter, boredom being the first, but more to the point, when March 26th rolled around, and that was supposed to be opening day, and I was in the booth at Citi Field, I just had this tremendous emptiness, this incredible void. And I think we all felt that to an extent. But, for me, it was like I've had a connection that's been severed, because I think we all realize among the Mets broadcast contingent that, we'd like to think that we've connected in a pretty positive way with the Mets fans over all these years. They become a part of you. And the essence of what we do as broadcasters is to communicate. And so at a visceral level, I just miss communicating. I miss broadcasting on a broader sense. And I certainly miss broadcasting Mets baseball. So I needed something to fill that gap. And that's where Twitter came in. And, they haven't locked me up yet, so I guess you could say so far so good.
Well, Howie, I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on BT Talks Baseball.
My pleasure, Brett. Always good to talk to you.
That was the great Howie Rose. I've had the great good fortune of interviewing Howie several times for my books. He's always a pleasure to speak with, and I really enjoyed our conversation today. Okay, this is normally the time reserved for the Waiting for Perlman segment. But I have to tell you something. It's been 7 weeks. We've had so many great guests: John Matlack, Frank Catalanato, Marty Appel, Edgardo Alfonso, Howie Rose. Mr. Perlman, thank you for your interest in BT Talks Baseball, but we have to move along. So I'm going to start a new segment next week. Inspired by the Frank Sinatra song, There Used to Be a Ballpark, I am going to profile a ballpark of yesterday, a baseball stadium that no longer exists, and talk a little bit about that each week. I hope you enjoy the segment. We're going to kick it off next week. Okay, one segment that's not going anywhere is Mel's Memories. Pop, I know you were asking me if you could change up the story a little bit. What do you got today?
Too bad this is not really a baseball story, but you can always tell the time we went to see the Phoenix minor league team and I was driving on the sidewalk. It was a bridge or something, wasn't it?
It was a pedestrian bridge, yes.
Yeah, no. And you were afraid to sit, so we had great seats, but you were afraid because you were afraid the balls were going to hit you. We had to move behind home plate.
Afraid the balls would have hit me. 17 line drives whizzed by our heads.
I know. But those are not tellable stories.
Not a tellable story? I think our viewers will beg to differ. And that non-tellable story has haunted me for several years. First of all, you driving on a pedestrian bridge, and then having line drives whiz by my head as I was trying to enjoy all of my bratwurst sandwiches in Phoenix. But thank you for sharing. Say hi to Mom. I love you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Well, that'll do it for another episode of BT Talks Baseball. I want to thank my guest, Howie Rose, my dad for sharing his memory, and of course you. Thank you so much for tuning in. I leave you, as always, with the words of the immortal Tug McGraw. You gotta believe. Bye-bye, everybody. We'll see you next week. If you are interested in getting a signed copy of any one of Brett Topel's books, please visit us at www.topelmetsbook.com.